Kia ora koutou, Rob Teppett, National Convenor, PSA delegates. We're having a discussion today with Graham Roper, who is a advocate for psychological first aid, and I'm going to let Graham introduce himself.
Yeah, tēnā koe. Graham Roper, as I said, I'm the founder and developer of the psychological first aid program, and it's for adults, and it's a facilitated program to enable people to understand some of the foundation words, knowledge and understanding of everyday mental health problems or issues, or not problems and issues. So we talk about all sorts of different things. It's a facilitated program, so people are actively involved in the whole process. And thanks very much for the invite, Rob. Appreciate it.
Kia ora. Yeah, a lot of our members talk about feeling stressed and anxious and concerned, worried, and it's evident to us as a union that actually if this is happening in the workplace, that's not good. That can impede or impact the way they work. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, there's worldwide there's a lot of evidence that demonstrates that. I know in New Zealand we've had some research that was done. They say anxiety, unmanaged anxiety, costs our economy about $1.2 billion a year in lost production, which is significant. The other side of that, though, is that a lot of people don't understand that anxiety can be and is often a normal reaction. It's not suddenly that you're unwell or suddenly unable to cope and then create a spiral. So understanding, and this is what we do in the program, for example, is help people understand that anxiety, a certain level of anxiety, is normal, and it's something that we will experience, and it's what we do with it's important. And as I said, people start ruminating on it, and then it starts to evolve. So it's about helping to understand that basic of, you know, what is anxiety? What is it really?
Great. Okay. So if I've got this right, like, you know, a lot of our people are like health and safety reps on a floor, and they know about fundamentals of like physical first aid, you know, if someone's perhaps had a stroke or a heart attack or whatever, and there are things that you can do. Are you saying that you can, in a similar way, you can do similar things for people who might have some sort of psychological or emotional distress?
Yeah, and there's two parts to it. There's the individual themselves.
Yeah.
So have it as an individual understanding how I tick.
Yeah.
They talk about that in culture, for example. The first thing you need to understand culture is to understand your own.
Yeah.
So understanding your own wellness and how you think that, and physical and emotional are tied together. Then you can help to understand how other people may or may not be interacting, or whatever it might be, and you can then offer them support in a way that's useful, as opposed to the you know, are you okay? So you're like, yeah, oh good, and wandering off. Something that's useful to both, but particularly the person who mightn't be feeling quite so on top of the world.
Now, Oranga Tamariki, as you're probably aware, you know, deals with some pretty harrowing situations.
Sure, yep.
So it seems to me that a lot of our members often are exposed to a lot of trauma and challenging things that anybody would find difficult to handle. So have you got any suggestions about how, if you are concerned about a colleague that you're working with, you feel like they might have had a particularly bad day or a particularly difficult experience with some work that they've been doing, how they could comfortably, safely approach that? Because one of the things I worry about is that people might be a bit reluctant to say, you know, ask, are you okay? Because what if you say no? And then what am I going to do next?
Yep, and that's a really good question. It's one that comes up a lot. The introduction of the Are You OK campaign was a useful campaign, but what we found is that people don't know how to answer the question if the person says no. So within the psychological first aid program is that there's a tool that we use and repeat and it's a simple one called talk. Now we all know the value of talking and how it can be useful, but we've just expanded it out. And the first thing, to use that example, is that you need to take time. Those kind of conversations aren't, oh, I've got a couple of minutes conversations. So understanding that both of you need time to express and time to listen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But for me, as a long-standing OT person, one of the things I know is that a lot of the people in this organisation are time poor. So I kind of hear you saying there, it's important if you're going to have these conversations because you are concerned about the other person, that you know that you have got the time to actually spend hearing or listening to that person.
Well, absolutely. Otherwise, the reality is you become isolated. Nobody wants to hear my story. And it might be that added to that, we had the next part that we're talking is the A, so T-A-L-K. The A is acknowledge that's how they're feeling. And so if they're feeling, I'm feeling anxious, tired, whatever it might be, is having somebody acknowledge that they believe them, as opposed to quickly dismissing them. If that makes sense, right? That's no good, you know. And then the L is the listening. And a lot of people talk about how do you listen with compassion and all those, but there's no demonstration that you can do. We all know what listening compassionately and intently looks like or feels like. So again, that, and time might be this long or might be that long. It's just about ensuring that you're giving them your presence, I guess, is another way of saying it. And the last part is the K for connect. You know, I know it doesn't normally spell with a K, but I can spell it as a K. As connect, and at some time it might be that they need to connect with somebody, and it might be a work colleague, it might be a family member, it might be a GP, it might be a kamatua, or it might be a mental health worker, but supporting them to connect if that's where they need to be. Often, though, if you're having these conversations regularly and they feel comfortable and trust that the conversations will be acknowledged and heard, that's all that's required to the old story, get it off their chest, rather than hold it in and hold it in. I was an advanced paramedic educator for 20 odd years, and I understand that the trauma and holding it in, it only leads to one outcome, and it's not a pleasant one. So understanding that is really important. So a simple tool, remember you've got psychologists and psychiatrists and counsellors all spend a lot of time learning the detail and all the other stuff. This is just a foundation tool, a start tool to enable people to, you know, to able to talk, knowing that somebody's going to take the time to listen to them, however long that may be. They'll acknowledge what they're saying, they'll listen intently to them, and they'll connect them if they need to.
I hear that, and that resonates with my experience in Oranga Tamariki. But one of the things that I'd be interested to hear your response to is, you know, it is a social work agency. We have people who are educated and schooled and active listening and counselling and dealing with it. But one of the things that seems to me is, you know, that adage about, like, you know, how the mechanic's car's broken down, the builder's house is always falling down, that kind of thing. I wonder whether those examples are applicable to our workplace too, and often we might assume that you know, we're really doing the right thing when we may not be doing the right thing with our colleagues. I'd be interested to see because that's similar to AMBOs, isn't it?
Yeah, you raise that analogy, and it's actually a very pertinent reality. I'm a panel beater before I became a paramedic, and my cars were never finished. Builders' houses are never finished, and I think it's just a human trait, that we fail to look after ourselves. We fail to look into the mirror or to look at our environment and saying, actually, it's always the one that's last on the list. I'll put the terrace on the house after I've built 4 other terraces for somebody else. People who work in the people industry, we'll call it, right, who work with people, because of their passion, will always put themselves last. And that becomes a risk. They know what to do, they know how to fix it, but I'm okay because I have these roles. And so this is about helping to understand that you need to look after and have some of your own tools as well.
Yeah, well, that really pushes my button there, because I do know, particularly with some of our care and protection practitioners who have tremendous workload, that they seem to be so committed and absorbed in the well-being of the Tamariki that they're working with, that they often neglect themselves.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, it's a difficult message to get across to people, because on the one hand it sounds like you're criticising them if you're saying, oh, you shouldn't do this, you should do that, you've got to do that. So how do you get that message across to people that it's actually important for your well-being to look after yourself in terms of your psychological wellness, but actually if you do that you could possibly be better at your job anyway?
And that becomes the environment that we're working within. We need an environment where we all understand and heard the same message. So we're all understanding the same message. We use an old Kamatu, when I was training ambulance personnel, talked about knowledge, understanding, tolerance, acceptance. The first thing we need to do is get some knowledge. So knowledge about our own well-being and stuff like that. What does it really look like? What are the language behind it? That helps to create that understanding. You know, so I understand now that why people do what they do sometimes. Tolerance, I mightn't agree, but I understand and I can tolerate that kind of situation and ultimately accept. So we all have different personalities, we all have different ways of doing things. And it's not about right and wrong, it's just that we're different. Accepting that difference enables exactly what we're talking about, the opportunity for not only yourself to reflect, but other people just to accept that reflection. Does that make sense? So is that you've had a really rough night at home, for example, the new baby or whatever, and you come to work and you're looking tired and you know, you're feeling grumpy and all the rest of it, to have your work colleagues just acknowledge that as being normal, actually it's actually okay, as opposed to saying you're trying to be all stoic and go in there and they're all going, oh, you know, they've obviously had a rough night, and it's creating that whole environment that people understand these are just normal responses to events that are happening in our lives. And because something occurs, and especially in the environment you're talking about, we will have normal responses. Sadness is a normal response. It's not suddenly depression. You know, sadness, you need to be allowed to be sad. Understanding that it's actually a normal response, particularly in light of the events you're experiencing. Having people understand that is also really useful. It's not suddenly you're depressed, therefore you need to go and have supervision and see a GP and all those other things which then impact on your job.
That I want to pick up on that, because I also have a sense in talking to members that sometimes they're reluctant to do like what we call SOSHI reports, like reporting things, because they're fearful that, oh, they'll think I'm not the full quid, they'll think I'm a lame duck, it's career limiting, you know, Rob hasn't got the resilience necessary for the job, you know, if he can't handle the heat in the kitchen he should get out, that kind of thing. You seem to be saying that's not the right way to approach managing.
There's a role a role and a place for, as you say, those sausages, tossies. There's a role and a place for them. They're there for a particular reason. But unless you have that base understanding and knowledge, anxiety, because of you might be given a file, you're reading the file, and because of the nature of the file is making you anxious, isn't an abnormal response. You'd have to agree. That's a normal response to seeing a horrible file. Acknowledging that is halfway to it. The fact that to think you'd be required to write down that I was anxious because I read this report is pathologizing what is a normal reaction. It's normal to feel anxious. If somebody sees that you're anxious within your group, and you might just come over to me and I'm the one sitting anxious and say, horrible report, and I can turn around and say, yeah, really don't, it's awful, and they can express that, right? You're listening, right? You're acknowledging that's how they feel. It suddenly becomes more and they talk about normal, but you know what I mean, it becomes just part of who we are as people, as humans. It's human to be anxious.
Yeah. So I hear you saying that, like, oh, so I don't have, I'm not, there's not something wrong with me, or I'm not necessarily deficient because I feel, sick in my guts about what I've just.
Because you're human.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing there then, because I know that, and it's good that Oranga Tamariki have soshies and stuff like that, and it is good that the health and safety people realise that it's important to have a database to record issues so that we know what the problems are. So I think we just need to, make it, like, my only concern in that space is that we need to somehow educate our workforce to understand that it is okay to feel these ways, and that, as you said, it's not necessarily abnormal or problematic or pathologising it. But in an organisation, it's great that you think like that, and I understand that. But like when we expand to involve more people, more divisions in the organisation, it seems to me there's challenges to actually making sure that everybody's got the same message. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think that is problematic. I like the word problematic, but I am more optimistic. I've met Oranga Tamariki senior managers just recently, and they're asking the same questions, which is what they're looking for, the same type of processes that they can maintain wellness within people and staff. And one of the clear messages that we gave to them, that everybody has to hear the same story and the same message and the same all those components at a fundamental level. So whether it be a senior manager at Oranga Tamariki head office, or a part-time social worker, I'm not decrying any of them, but just somebody who only there, they all have to have the same understanding, you'd agree, the same knowledge base, so that then we can build acceptance and tolerance. And that's what we're working with. That's why we've made it the course only 4 hours. One of the key things about 4 hours is to enable employers, so you're not losing staff for a whole day. It's a half day. Providing a detailed, it's about 60 odd page reference manual come first aid book that they take away with them. But you're right, it's the same message for everybody. It's not a special message as such, it's not a new message, but we all need to hear the same message, hear the same thing, that sadness is not depression. So that's what we're working really hard with, is to try and to ensure that it gets rolled out.
I'd like to ask you just one question about words that often is thrown around in our workspace. Is this word called resilience? Graham's really good because he's productive and he's resilient. We need people who are resilient. But what I hear is that resilience could come about or could be enhanced in a workforce if you acknowledge differences, or that's the sort of message I'm hearing from you. So we all want to be resilient, don't get me wrong. I think it is important to have a resilient workforce, but it's not something that is just God-given or something that you take off the shelf. It's something that is developed. Is that what you're saying?
It's resilient is natural and it's inherent in all of us.
Yeah.
That's the first point. Every human has resilience, built-in resilience.
Yeah.
It's how we've survived. It's how how as a species we've survived.
Yeah.
So we've all got natural resilience.
Yeah.
It only comes to the fore when we get challenged.
Yeah.
So we just had the 10th anniversary for the Christchurch earthquake.
Yeah.
And you look at the resilience, and you took resilience around Christchurch or Kaikoura earthquakes.
Yeah.
It's how people then rebuild.
Yeah.
Or work through whatever it is that faces them on that particular situation. So it might be a dramatic earthquake, or it might be something that's happened at work. It's having an understanding of what you do next. And that's where this comes in, is saying, well, resilience is what you do next. and it doesn't have, and it can look like all sorts of things. It, just turning up for work each day with a smile on your face might be a massive sign of somebody's resilience. That they can go through it and turn out and always be that smiley person. And that's their way of resilience and developing resilience. I don't think it's a box we can tick that, I've been through suicide, I've been through major losses of people stealing huge sums of money. People might say, well, you're pretty resilient. No, I just woke up each day and started another day. I have these experiences that drive who I am today, as I am here now. As you are here now, and if we had roles reversed and I was interviewing you, I'm sure you'd be able to tell me stories that we could call resilience. And recognising that we all have it. It's not something you develop, it's inherent in us. All you have to do is let it evolve and have an environment where it can evolve.
Well, that's great, because it seems to me that your psychological first aid program is just giving people, people on the ground, just concrete skills to actually start having these conversations.
Basic understanding, they get some practical skills. So if somebody's having a panic attack, you learn how to apply some tools to enable you to bring people out of a panic attack. I call them grounding techniques, but you go away with these tools. So if you do come across somebody who's got so over anxious and they're having a panic attack, how you can assist them to come back to what they call about the here and now. So there are the talk tool and the grounding techniques and now feedback are the two most tick boxes of what they learn and are going to use and hold on to. So but it is getting that understanding as the basis.
Well, thanks for that, Graham. And I'm quite excited about psychological first aid, because I know the union has been pushing it pretty hard with OT. We're trying to get it into our managers collective, and of course we want to introduce it into our operational collective when we go into collective bargaining, because it is a need that our members consistently have expressed for some time now. So, and it is encouraging to know that you've met with the OT management people and they acknowledge, yes, that there is a problem and we want to work on a solution together. So thanks for your time.
I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora.